Doris Perez, you are the first person to join us on Home Together this Thursday. I always like to come on here a little bit early to welcome people. Hi, Editor Christina, and thank you, Editor Christina, for all the good questions that you leave on my Instagram page. I always try to ask people what they want to know from the people that we're talking to. And Editor Christina, you always give me really good questions. So thank you very much. It says you're a writer or a lover of poetry. I looked you up. So thank you so much, Editor Christina. Kendra Ray, thank you. Good afternoon from Boston. Thank you for joining. Sherry Yamirez, I think. M.R. Sullivan from Tasmania. Wow. Hi from Minnesota. Question, Ala Jamie, hello, and thank you for all you're doing. Thank you. Mia 9, hello from Austin. Love Austin. Brenna Huska, hi. Hi, how are you? Hi from Myrtle Beach. Hi, must probably be beautiful there. So Judy Pepper, so good to be with you again. Good to be with you. Carol Ann, hi from Ireland. Wow, we are all over. Lucy from Philadelphia, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Key Largo, hi there. Uruguay, wow, wow, wow. Well, that is so great. Melbourne, Australia, Vita Clara. I'm so glad that we are being joined by such a global audience. That makes me really happy. Home Together, hello from Vermont. Wow, we have people from all over, Palo Alto, California, Doris Perez. So I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. We have a special guest, a lot going on in the news today. Read this morning that the most recent figures, 22 million of our brothers and sisters, of our fellow Americans have now filed new unemployment claims. 22 million people. These are extraordinary numbers, and that's why we wanted to talk with our guest today, Stephanie Ruhle. Stephanie is a colleague of mine at NBC News. She focuses on business. Last night she did a great town hall with small businesses, which I know is a real focus of yours. This is Patrick Schwarzenegger, my son. You always like me to introduce you.
Yes, thank you for introducing me.
And this is Champ, our dog, who also is home together with us. Usually before Patrick moved in, Champ loved and slept with me and now has abandoned me in favor of Patrick. So, but I'm okay. I'm okay with it. But anyway, Stephanie is really focused on small businesses. She's been reporting on that on her show on MSNBC, on town halls, on the Today Show, trying to help us kind of navigate. If you are filing for unemployment, she can help us with that. If you have a small business, she can help with that. Focusing on, whether you have a request for a loan, she can walk us through that. And I thought it would be really good to have her on today because of these new unemployment figures, because of so many people applying for these loans and feeling like they're either not getting them, wondering will they get them, wondering is there more where that came from. So I thought she'd be a really good person to invite over.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be able to talk with her, to hear kind of her points of view and some of the stuff that she's learned through some of the best in the business on CNBC, where she always is hosting shows. We know that she did a really big show last night with Gary Vee and Bethany Frankel, who we had on here a few weeks ago, and with Tillman Fertitta and some others. So I think that it's going to be really interesting to learn from her and get her point of view on these small business loans, about the unemployment, about everything like that.
Yeah, so that's why I thought it would be really important, because these new figures are really staggering. But I was just reading before we came on that President Trump had a video conference call and a conference call just moments ago with the nation's governors to talk about a multi-phase reopening of the economy. So the reports on that are just kind of dribbling in. I was reading about it before we went on here. These are not, as he said, a mandate, but these are phases to reopening the economy. Many people want the economy to open. Many people don't want it to open unless we have testing in place, unless we have guarantees that people won't infect other people. So there's a lot to reopening the economy. And but he's trying to kind of, at least in the last couple hours, we're finding out that he's trying to kind of have a multi-phase approach, leaving it up to governors, but beginning to kind of have that conversation. So perhaps she can also bring us up to date on what we know in real time.
Yeah. Champ, what have you thought of this conversation so far?
Hi from Michigan. Go Blue. Yes, Christopher, my youngest, his brother. Oh, there's Stephanie Ruhle. Hello. So get Stephanie. She's on there. Stephanie, there's Stephanie, my wonderful colleague. Good news on Stephanie Ruhle's show on MSNBC. So I don't want Stephanie to think she's being interviewed.
Hi.
There she is.
Hey, Stephanie, how are you?
Hey. Pretty good.
Hi, honey. How are you?
I'm good. I hear you talking Go Big Blue. I got to tell you, Michigan is breaking my heart this week. You know, they're having, I get it. You know, there's huge frustration there about reopening the state, and there's a ton of backlash. And I understand. I mean, this is like an out-of-body experience, and especially for places that aren't necessarily feeling like a hot spot.
Yeah.
A state like Michigan, think about how hard Michigan was hit in 2008 with the auto crisis and the housing crisis. There's so many people in Michigan. Think about Flint, Michigan, that are still not on their feet, but they're back in the workforce. And now suddenly you've got 15% of eligible workers in that state filing for unemployment. I don't think people have factored in the emotional toll this takes on people.
Well, you could see all the protests in Michigan in the last day or two against the governor and against this stay-at-home shelter in place. And I was just saying, by the way, this is my son, Patrick, Stephanie.
Hi,
how are you? You think I don't know who Patrick is from social media?
Well, he always says you have to introduce me, mommy. So
so many of the guests I have not met in person or gotten to meet through social media or FaceTime or whatever. So I like to introduce myself, or you introduce me. So,
but you talked last night. I want to come back to Michigan, but we were just talking, Stephanie, about 22 million new unemployment claims. 22 million is the new number this week. You're talking about Michigan, about the unrest in Michigan, but so many governors having to weigh whether they should reopen the economy. I was just hearing that Trump was on the phone in the last couple of hours talking with the nation's governors about a process to reopen the economy. And I'm sure many small business owners are wondering, what does that mean? Is that actually happening?
Well, I think there's a whole lot of things in there. And one thing that I would say, and I know people don't want to hear it, but when you hear the unemployment number that large, there is a tiny silver lining. And the silver lining is this: we're listening to the directions. We need to stay home, right? The reason the numbers are going down is because we are sheltering in place. And that means for the time being, a lot of people are out of work. Now, the government is trying to figure out what do they need to do to kind of freeze the economy, put us all in like a time machine and get us to the other side. The problem is these are uncharted territories. We do have a government that's not working together yet. But, you know, yet you talked about the president, now saying to the governors, they should sort of lead the way. Yesterday, and I get it, there's a lot of criticisms, but the president did have calls with dozens of CEOs. And here's a disconnect. Everybody keeps hearing, well, all the CEOs want to open up again. No, they don't. Business leaders want to open up when they know that their employees are safe and their customers are safe. This isn't like a snow day where we say, okay, Maria, everything's fine again. Let's rush out and go back to work. This is a public health issue. So you've got guys like Mike Bloomberg working with 50 mayors across the country, figuring out how do we address this from a public health perspective. Bill Gates today on a conference call with mayors said we're likely 12 to 18 months away from a vaccine. If Bill Gates is right, that means social distancing is going to be in place for that long. And it doesn't mean that things won't reopen, but it does mean you and I aren't going to be sitting next to one another at the movies. And so we say, oh, restaurants are dying to open up again. Of course they are. But we also have to remember that restaurants, if they are under 60% occupancy, they can't stay open.
Right.
And once the public health officials step in here and they take 30% of the chairs out of a restaurant, That's going to change. Do you really think bars are going to be packed again? They're not. And that is something we have to really get our heads around.
Right. I was watching, part of your segment last night, which I thought was so interesting, how some of the people, some of your guests were bringing the perspective from the other side of saying, okay, everyone really wants to open the economy, but have you thought about the consumer? The consumer isn't really necessarily wanting to go to a big restaurant right now, going to an event, going to a large crowded space. So even if we do technically open up the market, the demand might not be there, and we'll be right back to where we were. So why not continue to utilize this time and do that social distancing, like you said?
Or figure it out, right? We're a massive country. You can say there are certain regions that you can open back up, right? We don't have to work unilaterally, but it would be great if we could get on the same page. And I know this sounds naive, and it's easy for someone who has the privilege of social distancing and working from home. There is a silver lining in that for the last more than 8 years, we have seen ourselves socially and culturally be more divided. You have talked about best friends from high school, sisters, parents, not speaking to one another over, how people identify themselves or their political leanings. Well, suddenly this has sort of leveled everything, right? Mm-hmm. Before this, people of privilege might say, oh, I'm so glad I'm really well connected because, the president of this company is going to help me get ahead. Right now, you care about your neighbor again, right? My mom and dad know all their neighbors. And my mom knows all my neighbors in New York City, but I didn't. And now people care about their neighbors again. So that return to simplicity, maybe that, Maria, is going to be a silver lining that'll help all of us here.
Well, that might be a wonderful silver lining, but it's not going to help all the people who are lined up for food banks. It's not going to help the 22 million people filing for unemployment. And it's not going to help the small businesses that are trying to get a loan and aren't getting it, aren't accessing it.
Okay.
So what can you say?
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Wait, there's one other group you didn't talk about that I'm especially worried about economically. However you feel, but over here, we have 11 million undocumented immigrants that live in the United States. Right now, they don't have access to health care, they don't have access to get any of the government aid, and they don't have access to make money. And so that is just an entire population to think about what this is doing to them economically. And we've got to start thinking, how can we be creative and help our entire communities? Because from a health perspective, we are in this together. But let's talk about small businesses.
Yeah, let's talk about small businesses, since we're all in this together, and people have filed for loans and they haven't gotten them. And now we're being told today there's no more money where that came from.
There's not. So when this loan was created, it's a great idea, because let's say we tell all the small businesses they have to stay shut down for a couple of months, and we put all their employees on unemployment. You know what's going to happen? All those small businesses in our towns and our neighborhoods that we know and love are going to go out of business because they can't stay afloat. And so the idea of the Paycheck Protection Program is you come and you go to the bank and say, I need to borrow this money. And if you keep full employment, if you don't fire any of your employees, you basically get paid payroll for 2.5 months. You keep everybody on staff, you get through this period, and then you reopen. It's an amazing idea. I love it. You don't have to pay it back. Now, when they came up with the idea, it was meant for service businesses. It was meant for restaurants and bars and gyms and a jewelry store. And the idea was any business whose revenue is down 50% or more from last year, that's who this is for. Well, when they ended up writing it, putting it in the bill, they took some of the language out and said, you just need to be a company with 500 people or less. Now, they had very good intentions, because the less language you have in the law, that means the money can get out quicker, and that's the goal. But the problem is, any business, Maria, that has less than 500 people who gets to say, well, I'm impacted by this, they're applying. And this is the problem. That jewelry store you're talking about, they don't have an accountant. They don't have a tax lawyer. So them getting themselves organized and getting their application and their payroll stubs together to give to the bank, that takes them a few days. But if you're a law firm or an insurance company or a talent agency or a lobbying firm, you probably have all of that. And you have relationships at banks. And so there you are, and you were the first in line. And now there's no money left. So Congress is negotiating to put another $250 billion in. But one thing that I'm urging them to do is figure out, how do you get this money to the communities that need it most. They've broadened out the banks, so now they have some fintech companies like PayPal and Square, but that's what we have to do. I'm going to give you one extreme example. Are you ready?
Yep.
Let's say I owned a yacht, and
Yeah.
I owned a private plane, but let's go with yacht. If I owned a yacht and I chartered it 3 times a year to other people to go on spring break, and obviously those charters are going to get canceled because no one's vacationing, technically, I can apply for the loan because that yacht has a captain and 6 staff, and I've lost some income.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing. This is human nature, right? If the money's available to you and the government's offering it, I guess you should go for it. But this is a moment where I am praying that cooler heads prevail. Because remember, after the financial crisis, right? The banks got bailed out. The auto industry got bailed out. And all those people in the coastal cities got better. But people who lost their homes didn't. And they're still suffering. So if 10 months from now, these true small businesses that are the heart and soul of our country aren't standing up, and the rich got richer, and the poor got poorer and sicker, Maria and Patrick, I fear that we will have social unrest 10 months from now like nothing we have ever seen. So we have to take this moment to really think about who we are, what we want to be, and what our social obligation is.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I've heard of these kind of loopholes and actually businesses taking advantage of that. And that's something that we talked to Marcus Lemonis about last time, where he was saying it's too wonky of a thing from Congress right now. There's businesses that were struggling in December and January during a boom economy that are now going to be able to apply who are already struggling prior to all of this. Mm-hmm. And there's not really a way to show. So what are you suggesting that a ma and pa or a small family-owned business that has one pizza store over on the corner or one nail salon down the street or something like that, how can they ensure that these types of businesses are the ones that are going to get these loans rather than someone that has 50 employees and a large corporation?
What they have to do is not give up, right? We cannot let those small businesses, especially women-owned businesses, because traditionally women say like, I'm not a money person. You cannot put your head under the covers right now. You can't stop looking at your bills. You need to call your bank, right? We know that there's no money left. We learned that today. But most likely Congress is going to come up with another $250 billion. And what we're urging all those businesses to do, get your act together. And it's hard because let's talk about that pizza shop. They may not have had like an organized payroll system. They didn't have it figured out. We need to urge them, take this time, take a deep breath, fill out the application, get your house in order, and keep calling. It's no different from people right now who are saying, I have so many bills and there's not official mortgage relief or rent relief. There's not an official one, but there is help. You have to ask for it. Pick up the phone, call your bank, call your credit card company, call your landlord. If you own a tiny restaurant, your biggest expense is your rent. And you're right, your landlord might not give you a break, and it might be a tough time for your landlord too. But guess what? It's worse for a landlord to have an empty storefront. And if landlords don't find a way to work as a community and try to cut their businesses a break, they don't want to have an empty Madison Avenue or a Bleecker Street.
No, I mean, trying to go find a new store during these times is not going to be too easy for them as well. No. So I totally agree with you on that. But I'm still trying to wonder, you know, I have companies that I've talked to all the time that don't have that kind of, chief financial officer, someone that is taking all of those books. And one of the things that we've seen on the show, like The Profit, is the amount of companies that don't take their, their business into consideration and really have their numbers down to a point is pretty amazing and shocking. And hopefully that's something that people will learn from all of this. But how are they supposed to compete amongst other businesses that do have that?
Yeah, because there's a lot of people on here, Stephanie, who are saying, I'm a small business. I'm in line. I can't get to the head of the line. I'm waiting. I'm dying. The phone doesn't answer. I called to check out on my status. No one answers.
They can't give up. We have to beg them, don't give up. Because here's the thing. The PPP program is just one program. And that money might run out. Now, the president and the Treasury Secretary have said, we're going to keep replenishing it. We're going to keep replenishing it. And I'm not saying you should bank on it, but I'm begging you not to give up. And I'll give a different example. There's a lot. You talked about the 22 million people who are on unemployment. There's a lot of people who still haven't applied yet, who never thought of themselves emotionally as someone who might need to go to a food bank or might need to apply for unemployment. This is a time when we have to beg our friends and colleagues, let's put our pride aside and get online and apply. And I know in the state of California, you're trying to apply for unemployment. The phone is busy. The website's down. You have to just keep trying. And here's the good news. It's retroactive. So unemployment, let's say you're saying, I've been trying for 3 weeks and nobody's answering the phone. When you finally get through and you give them your paperwork and they say you haven't been working since March 3rd, March 30th, pick the date, you will get that money retroactively. We have to urge people, and I know it's so hard, don't give up. Congress put $2.2 trillion aside. That money should be going to us. Yes, the system isn't perfect, but don't believe that it's not for you. Keep calling.
So I think that people are here saying, that's good advice not to give up. Good to know that it's retroactive. People saying, over and over here, like, I can't get through. What about no help for these kind of salons, small businesses? What do we do in the meantime? They can't survive in the meantime. But I guess what you're saying is, I'm a small business owner. My mother was scared to death. We can't survive. I'm trying not to give up.
So you can split it in a few categories. So the unemployment benefits have been massively expanded through the CARES Act. Chuck Schumer calls it unemployment on steroids. So they beefed up the amount they pay and the length they'll pay. And before this, California certainly knows about gig workers. Gig workers, freelance workers, people who are self-employed were not eligible for unemployment. They are this time. You're
okay,
eligible
let's repeat
now.
that. Let's repeat that because there's so many independent contractors, shall we call them, that wonder, am I eligible? So I think, can you just repeat that?
Yes.
That who is eligible now in unemployment on steroids?
So I'm going to take you into two different categories. You're under the CARES Act. Anyone who has lost their job, anyone who is quarantined, anyone who has to stay at home and take care of someone else, anyone who is a freelance worker or a gig economy worker. And I think those are two very important points because that, has been an issue over the last few years. So many people in the gig economy don't have benefits, right? They don't get, because those companies have never paid into the payroll tax. They didn't pay into the system. Well, now that's changed. So they absolutely should be applying. Now, separately, let's say you're a small business and you're asking, well, can I apply for unemployment and can I get the small business loan? Well, you can't get both because the small business loan is contingent on you keeping your employees on. And if you're that employee, you got to stay working.
So am I a business owner? Kelsey Smith here. Am I a business owner and can I apply for unemployment? I think she just answered that.
And do you have to keep...
you can apply for unemployment, yes, or you can apply to get the PPP, which is the forgivable loan, but you cannot apply for both.
Okay. And do you have to keep on 100% of your staff, or is there a percentage of it?
Let's walk through that. That's a great question. So the way PPP works, if you want to get the loan 100% forgiven, meaning the government pays for it, you have to have 100% of your staff. But let's say you keep 50% of your staff, then you can have 50% of it forgiven. And the other 50%, you'll have to pay back, but it's a really low interest rate loan. But when you talked earlier, I think you were talking about a restaurant owner. This is a very tricky time because it's easy to say, well, why don't you go out there and take a disaster loan, take a small business loan? Well, that's really hard to do because on the other side of this, we don't know if people are going to be rushing back out to go to a restaurant, to go to a store. Retail is actually the industry that I'm the most worried about because for the last 10 years, we've talked about the Amazon effect and sort of the American shopping mall was dying. It was dying before. Think about what it's doing now.
Yeah, I agree.
Amazon and Walmart have become the two most critically important business companies, in our lifetime. And it's unlikely you're going to see people go back to a shop, before. It's going to be really difficult.
What do you think, Stephanie? Who's inspiring you now? I know you spoke, Patrick said to Gary Vee and Bethany Frankel last night on small businesses. You mentioned Bill Gates talking about that we're 18 months away from a vaccine. What business leaders have inspired you, impressed you over the last 2 weeks with the way they've taken care of their employees, with the way they've stepped up to manage this?
Well, this won't come as a surprise. You know, he's a California favorite. Mark Benioff from Salesforce is a truly extraordinary leader. He led a commitment among CEOs. He made something called the 90-day pledge, where he pledged that during this period of time, no matter what, he would not do any significant layoffs. And I actually think, and I know this sounds silly to some people, this is an opportunity to create inclusive capitalism, right? This is an opportunity to say, how do we actually take care of our employees and take care of our customers? And honestly, I'm not inspired yet, but I'm thinking a lot about Amazon. And here's why. 10 months ago, Bernie Sanders went to Walmart's annual meeting. And he went there demanding that they put a worker, somebody in the labor force, on their board. And I even thought, like, Bernie, like, you're kind of pushing it. And he really didn't get any traction. But this idea is sitting with me right now, because I want you to just think about this, and everyone listening. Amazon right now, Walmart, they're two of the only companies in the world making an enormous amount of money. And you know who benefits from that? Their executives and their shareholders. But the reason those companies are doing so well is because of their lowest wage workers who are putting their lives on the line to pack boxes and stock shelves. And in the 50s and 60s, that's when the middle class was created in this country, and they really rose up. This is a chance when we need to re-examine the value of every person in an organization and what they do. Because when you turn someone from a shift worker to a stakeholder, right? If you walk into your grocery store today or your CVS today, those people in those stores are so proud to be there. They are stakeholders. And this is a chance for those companies to find a way to treat those employees like stakeholders. Starbucks has done it from the beginning. They've always treated their employees as partners. They've offered tuition programs, and the retention they have. When you go in, one of the reasons Starbucks has been so successful, it's a joyful experience. From the beginning, Howard Schultz said, this is the third place. You can hang out here and don't need to order 3 drinks. I want you to feel like you're part of a community. And I'm hoping that a lot of those businesses that I referenced, I hope they are taking this moment to see how important those essential workers are and figure out how to give them that.
There's a lot on here about where is Jeff Bezos. I mean, you know, it's a really, you've seen some CEOs, I think, step forward. You mentioned Mark Benioff, obviously, but as you mentioned, 2 companies making a lot of money, and we haven't really heard from Jeff Bezos about how he's going to support his workers.
Wouldn't it be the perfect time for Amazon to deliver every kid in the country a computer? Something that is weighing on me a lot. I have 3 kids, and they're all doing distance learning, and it's a challenge even for me. But every day I'm organizing a box, finding an extra computer. Think about all the kids in this country. Okay, social distancing is a privilege. Only, right? You can social distance if you have a house with lots of rooms. It's easy for my kids to do it because we have 2 computers. And this is a chance when I would love for the Jeff Bezos of the world. Amazon has more demographic data on every person in this country than anyone. And so I hope that they can take this time to think about what this has done to all of those kids who are home, who might not have fast Wi-Fi or don't have a computer, because their universes have been rocked. And they may have parents that can't full-time support them. And I'd love for those business leaders to really think about this.
I mean, speaking of Amazon, I mean, the irony of, I saw this morning on CNBC early was the 22 million unemployment, and then Amazon at their new 52-week high. It was like such a drastic
disconnect.
On the cover of CNBC, where one of the background was the 22 million, and red, bold, and then in green below is that Amazon hit $2,400 or something dollars a share today. So pretty wild. You know, I want to go back.
Well, I should say Amazon is hiring. So for people who are looking for work, we should tell them Amazon, Walmart, CVS. Go to any of their websites. You can go to amazon.jobs, and in the drop-down box, you can type your state in, and you can see the jobs that are available. And then there's some companies where there's jobs from home. Amazon does have jobs from home, United Healthcare, Rosetta Stone, which that one makes me depressed because that means that there's a big rush of people learning a foreign language, and I'm definitely not spending my time doing that. So they are actually hiring. I would just love for them to think about this hiring process and embrace those customers, those employees who are really putting themselves out there.
So I have a question, and I want to see if you have any ideas on a different way of these kind of loans, or if there's a different version of the trickle down effect. As you're saying that helping out these small businesses and how long it's taking them, they still have the burden of rent. And rent is usually one of the largest proportions of their overall overhead costs. I see that with some of my restaurants and stores myself. Is there a way to benefit higher up that trickles down, that ensures a trickle down, where the landlord says, hey, we're not having X, Y, and Z payments today, so we are going to forgive this month, or hey, this month can be paid back at the end of your 10-year term, or something to ensure those kind of blend and extends, as they say?
So here's what's tricky. We're a really complicated country. And it's
Right.
easy to say, why can't that landlord give me a break? He might not be a massive landlord with 58 buildings. Your building might be the only building he has. And we are a free markets capitalist society, right? And so in good times, we have a survival of the fittest environment. And right now we need a rescue. Now, one idea that's been floated around that I love, but I know that it's complicated. We have asked everyone in this country, basically, to change every part of their lives and stay home. Yet all of our bills are still mounting.
Right.
So there is a scenario where what if the government said, we are going to have a month-long national economic holiday while everybody's home, right? We're going to put a freeze on anything that you owe. The government could step in and basically take over all the biggest payroll systems out there and pay the employees and simply say, we're just going to put all of this on ice. Because right now, the advice that I'm giving is so daunting, where I'm saying, well, there's not a universal program. So Maria, you're going to need to call Visa, and Patrick, you're going to need to call American Express, and that's taxing on us. And imagine you're calling every single company that you owe a bill to at the end of the month. It would be great. The tax this is putting on us emotionally, culturally, really has me so concerned. And when you talk about trickle down, think about the tax you feel in your own family. It gets significantly higher the more financially compromised you are.
And what are people saying to counteract that argument that you just came up with of putting everything on a full-blown pause, freeze for 1 month?
You know, there's lots and lots of ideas floating around. There's a man who, his name is Rich Handler, he's the chairman of Jeffries. He actually wrote an extraordinary letter about this, and I actually gave it to the White House and said, you guys might want to consider it. I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas out there. They're trying to figure it out. But I'm worried that the way they're doing it, there's really very little oversight.
Right.
Right. So Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin basically has $500 billion sort of at his discretion to decide who they want to bail out. And what has me very concerned about that is that's how Occupy Wall Street was born. When there was the recovery after 2008, the government came in and they had TARP and they rescued the banks and the auto companies, and there wasn't enough transparency, and people who were left out were enraged. And I am very worried that the way we're doing it right now is going to cause that again even worse.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of unfolding in real time. As you say, things are changing in real time. These unemployment figures are changing in real time, even though they say there's nothing more for small businesses today. That could change on Monday, right? I mean, the government is making it up, fortunately or unfortunately, as we go along.
But Maria, if we keep talking about it every day, and something that has happened in the last few years, we realized there were large swaths of the country that were forgotten, and we can't forget them this time. Yes. In 2006, President Obama's last State of the Union address, I remember, he said, anyone who says we're not in an economic recovery is peddling lies. And I remember being in New York thinking, yeah, he's right. but he wasn't right, because there are huge pockets of this country where there wasn't a recovery. And people in rural areas, it was becoming less and less populated. They've lost their hospitals, they've lost their schools. And so I think the division that we've seen in the last few years, and now we're going through a crisis, the more we can think about what you are personally experiencing as a family and as a community, the more you can give brain and heart capacity to thinking about how else this is impacting people outside your circle. I think it's going to have a big impact.
Totally agree. Well, Stephanie, I want to thank you so much. I know you've been working kind of round the clock, doing all kinds of things. So we'll hopefully have you back on. There's so many questions.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and people in Michigan, people have ongoing questions. And I know you've been doing, even on your Twitter feed and stuff, answering questions. So people have additional questions. I'm a small business owner. I haven't received anything. So you can go on to Stephanie's Twitter, her Instagram, and ask her, either one of them, and ask her.
Because you know what, Maria? Here's the thing. We are in this together. And I know people are in all different situations, but if we can care about one another, if we can remind one another that we're connected and we want to figure this out together, I think we have a chance of doing it.
Amen. Stephanie Ruhle, thank you so much.
For including me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Bye. What? Great. Well, I want to thank her. She's a colleague of mine at NBC. And there were a lot of really good questions there on that interview. Is that still rolling?
No, I don't. I mean,
what does that mean?
Still.
We're just
maybe we're frozen.
We're frozen? Oh, we're never frozen. We cannot be frozen. So I think we want to, maybe that picture of Stephanie's frozen, or maybe Stephanie's thing is going around and around. But we can still go around and around, and thank her for joining us. She had a lot of good information, up-to-date information.
Yep.
And I thought your comment about Amazon best figures in juxtaposition to these 22 million new unemployment claims is really startling.
Wild. It's
oh, Wanda, you aren't frozen. Okay.
You aren't frozen. Yeah, but anyway, it's wild to watch kind of the stock market, CNBC stuff in the morning and see that kind of juxtaposition like you're talking about. But man, she was really, really smart, and she knew a lot about the different loans and PPP program and small business association loans and everything like that. So if you have more questions, I think hit her up, because she seems to know way more than I do, or than we do. And that's why we try to
gig economy, all of that, distinguishing that for us, and unemployment on steroids was really helpful.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
So if you guys have questions, talk with her, and we continue to look forward to highlighting people like her and others that are using their platforms to help other people and to give back and to spread, correct knowledge. And so please keep checking in with us.
Yeah, people saying, can we do Stephanie again? We will.
Maybe we'll do her again on Small Business Saturday.
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Quite educated in that space.
Yeah, she is quite educated.
Yeah, she's quite educated.
In many spaces.
Many spaces, but in the business segment.
Yes, good NBC News reporters are educated in multiple spaces.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, we want to thank you guys so much for joining us on Home Together. And I'm going to go over to the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, and we're going to start a thing called WHAM Now. And these are conversations about women's health, Alzheimer's prevention, brain health. So if you're interested in any of those subjects, go over to the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. It's called WHAM. And we're going to be talking with Dr. Drew Ramsey about what you need to know about keeping your brain healthy, and what you need to know if you are a caregiver for a parent who might be struggling with cognitive impairment and or Alzheimer's.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
thank you.
Have a great day, and we will see y'all tomorrow.
Bye.